Hello and welcome to this video. Today we're going to talk about WinterML shovels and snow shovels. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more about snow shovels, what to look for, what maybe makes a good WinterML shovel, then stay tuned and we'll see what we can cover. So snow shovels, or as often all of these will be sold, is avalanche shovels, so rescue shovel. But we're going to talk about them today really in the context of a winter mountain leader. So not so much, fingers crossed, digging people out of avalanche debris, but all the other things that you might use it for as a winter mountain leader. We're going to split it up. I've got a number of different sort of shovels to chat through. I'm certainly not going to recommend the best shovel to buy, but we're going to split it up and looking at the handle. So what type of handle you might have, what sort of shaft you might be after, how it might attach to the shovel, the shovel blade and the shovel handle, and then finally just a little bit about the blade itself. So to start off with, really when it comes to handles, you've got two choices really. You've got sort of a classic T-shaped handle. You want to think briefly about the fact that, when you pick it up in the shop or try it out, that you're going to have big gloves on. It's winter. So just making sure that handle's, big enough for big gloves and, relatively sturdy as well. And then your other option really is the D-shaped shovel. There's no doubt about it. A D-shape is going to be a better digging shovel in the sense that you can really grip onto it and you get loads of sort of traction with it. But whether that's needed ultimately at WinterML level is sort of debatable. So it's certainly not a game changer for me. If the shovel had all the criteria I wanted but not a D handle, then I'd go for it. But if I got the choice, I'd always pick a D over a T. Simple as that. So that's sort of handles, pretty simple. Shaft again is fairly simple. Again, basically you're trying to decide whether you want an extendable or just a fixed size. So a lot of shafts will come with a fixed size shaft. Yeah, lighter weight, less things to break, less things to lose, less bits to go wrong, I suppose. Or an extendable shovel, yeah, so slightly heavier. And I suppose a few other things to go wrong within it, but on the whole, they're fairly sturdy. Pros and cons, obviously the single piece shaft is lighter weight, yeah. That's really its only benefit. The benefit of having an extendable one is just that leverage when you're forcing blocks of snow around, but more importantly, you don't have to bend over as much. So if you're doing a lot of digging, then it's certainly going to help with back pain and things like that. So again, we're thinking about what we're using a shovel for in a WinterML context. Like I said, fingers crossed it's never digging anyone out of avalanche debris. We do everything within our powers to avoid that, obviously. So more likely it's digging emergency shelters or snow holes or platforms for clients to stand on, potentially bucket seats. So you could be using your shovel in less of a time pressured situation, but more often. It's a fairly common tool for a winter mountain leader to have. So for me, having an extendable shaft to just make digging a little bit easier and a little bit more comfortable is definitely a good thing. So I definitely go for that extendable shaft. Cool. And then this is probably the most important point, this next one, is how they attach to the shovel blade. For use, both in terms of strength and just in terms of ease. So at the simplest end of the spectrum, we've got just the two pins that you squeeze in, yeah, and it just slides in. Now, it's fine, it works fine, yeah, on the whole. But as you can see there, I've just shoved it through too far and it hasn't popped out. Yeah, so I've got to bring it back out. So 9 times out of 10, we're not doing it in this under a stress position, you know, so we're not rushing. But if you were, it'd be really easy to put that through too far. The other thing that happens with these ones is that ultimately it's just a clip of metal that can easily get twisted round and come out. And then it can be a right faff to get it back into position. So probably the cheapest way of attaching the shovel, the lightest way of attaching the shovel, but definitely the most likely to go wrong and to break. So for me, I'd be avoiding something like that. Far better would be to just have a pin that's in and can't come out. Yeah. So both of these models have simple pins. Yeah. So that can't come out. What this one has that's really nice is it has a slide up at the front. So it just gets depressed as you go in. You don't even have to do any pushing. So nice and simple. Yeah. This one doesn't have the sort of slide on it, but what it has on the actual shovel blade is a sort of a shape that forces it to be slid in. And both of these systems, you can't push the handle in too far because they have stoppers in here on both systems. So for me, I'm looking for a simple pin system, something that you don't have to depress to get it in. It will just slide in. And then a system within the shovel, whatever it is, to stop that handle going in too far. So when you shove it in, if you are in a position of stress and speed, you're not going to over insert it and basically make the shovel unusable. So that's maybe how it attaches. And then just thinking about sort of how they've built the attachment point. So if I go back to this shovel here, this shovel is just one piece of metal that they've molded. Yeah, it has no reinforcements really around here. Yeah, no reinforcements at the front. And so we'll do the job. There's no doubt about it. You know, it's come from Backcountry Access, this shovel, good manufacturer, make quality equipment, but it's not going to put up to loads of digging. So this isn't a shovel that I would ever dream of using to dig snow holes and dig, you know, big amounts of snow on a regular basis. Yeah, because this is just going to weaken and it's going to break. Yeah, so cracks basically form just in here where the leverage is, and eventually this bit will snap off. If we compare it to this shovel here, so this has got a totally separate sort of collar for where the shovel goes in, yeah, and then they've welded it in place along here. And so you've basically got 2 layers of metal welded in. Now, it definitely makes it heavier. You know, this shovel blade is considerably heavier than this one. Yeah, noticeably heavier, but it's a lot stronger. Yeah, and I would happily use this sort of shovel blade or this attachment type to dig multiple snow holes year after year, and that's what this shovel has done, you know, over time, and it's got no signs of damage or cracking, whereas similar shovels to this I've broken. In fact, I'm just looking at this shovel now. There is actually a small micro fracture just on here, and this shovel has done like a fifth of the amount of digging that the blue one has. So thinking about how they attach it. This one is a sort of a middle house where it's not got a separate sleeve for or collar for the shovel attachment, but they've put in an extra support here just to try and welded it on. So, you know, a halfway house, a little bit lighter, but again, we're thinking about what we're using our shovel for, and we want a bit of weight and strength to it because we're going to use it on a regular basis. It's not just a rescue shovel. And then the last thing really to think about is just the blade itself. And by that, there's not a huge amount of sort of thought process that you need to put into this. Just thinking about size as well, you know, a large shovel blade isn't necessarily a good thing, um, because the snow that we're digging in a winter ML context is not fresh, light, fluffy snow. You know, that's not going to help us build our snow shelters and things like that. And we don't get much of it in Scotland. We're going to be digging melt freeze, yeah, so potentially through neve layers, through ice layers, and certainly through, you know, windblown snow, wind slab and things like that, and metamorphosed snow. So much heavier and much denser. So, you know, this shovel, you know, I suppose Reflexu makes it, backcountry access, so not a European market. This would be great for moving lots of powder around because it's a really big blade. But in Scotland, once you get a quantity of snow on there, it's actually almost too heavy to move efficiently. So I'd definitely be looking for something, you know, a little bit smaller. This is from Orthovox, this one, so European manufacture. You know, maybe not quite as much powder, denser snow, more moisture in it often. So a slightly smaller blade is going to be useful. So those are the main things that I'm thinking about when it comes to snow shovels and what I'm looking for when I'm buying one in a winter ML context. You know, no matter what you buy, thinking winter ML context, it's going to be appropriate as a rescue shovel as well. So you don't sort of need to worry too much about that flip side of it. Couple of other, you know, little things that you might think about when you're purchasing a shovel. One of them is, some of them come, none of these do unfortunately, but some of them come with a sort of a hoeing attachment. So quite a lot of the Orthovox ones, you can attach the shovel handle in like that, and then you can use it to hoe or to drag snow out, which is useful when you're trying to sort of drag it out of an emergency shelter or a snow hole door, which is really useful. So I'm thinking about it like that. Yeah, and that's mainly shovels, I suppose. Yeah, one more thing is some of the shovels come, these are all sort of pretty much okay, but some shovels, Black Diamond are a little bit guilty of this. They have quite an aggressive bend on the shovel handle, which is great for digging. Yeah, they make really good digging shovels, but they're a right pain to get into your rucksack. So if you had a rucksack which had a separate, you know, avalanche pouch on the front, that's great. But if you're storing it inside your rucksack with all your other kit, they often bend over so much they're quite difficult to pack and then get in and out. On that note, if you get the chance to get a rucksack that's sort of winter ML and winter mountaineering appropriate and has an avalanche pouch, then they are a good idea to get, mainly to save your other kit. Obviously, it makes, you know, the shovel and any other sort of rescue equipment quicker to get at. But as I said, you know, that's not our main focus at Winter ML. You know, we're doing everything in our power to avoid that sort of terrain. But no matter how much you look after your shovel in Scotland, it will start to get pretty ragged along. And this is pretty sharp now with quite a few sharp edges. If I was to shove this into my rucksack with lots of other things, undoubtedly it would catch in all my dry bags and probably just shred them. So yeah, I suppose I could take a file to that and just smooth off all those edges and birds, and that would get around that problem. Or if possible, you know, something like the Patagonia make the Descensionist, which is a sort of a mountaineering pack, but has an avalanche pocket on it as well. So just something else to think about. Not really winter ML snow shovel sort of related, but more rucksack related. Cool. So hopefully this has been useful. I'll put down in the notes below what these shovels are, or at least roughly what they are, because they're all, you know, 5+ years old now. So they might not make them, but I'll put them in just as examples. Like I said, I'm not going to give it, this is the best shovel to get. You know, ultimately think about grip, shaft, attachment, and blade. Come up with the right sort of combination that works for you, and then pretty much go out and look for the cheapest deal that you can find. And that's the way to approach it, in my opinion. Great. hopefully it's been useful, and see you out and about on the snowy mountains.